So there are several ways to invoice customers, and one of the fastest and most simple ways is invoicing customers from a sales order. Let's go and have a look, and I will demonstrate this by creating a new sales order. So by clicking on the sales order action in my role center, I can create a new order, assign a number, and for example in this case I will sell to customer 10,000. You can see the posting date, the order date, due date, and so on. Let's go to the lines and suppose that this customer orders some items. So for example, let me take the London swivel chair from location blue and suppose that the customer wants 4 pieces. Okay, what I'm selling to the customer is not very important. I'm selling an item. Most important is the invoicing process. And if I scroll to the right, you can see that the 4 is copied to the quantity to ship and quantity to invoice fields. And based on these fields, I can now start processing the order. So if I click on the post action in the ribbon, you can see that there are 3 options. So the first one, ship, the second one, invoice, or ship and invoice. So and this is the first way to invoice customers. So based on your ship quantity, you can also invoice customers from a sales order. And suppose I would like to ship and invoice the sales order immediately. I can stick with the third option, click on OK, and the sales order is posted. If you want, you can go and have a look at the posted invoice. So here is the posted invoice. I can see my 4 London swivel chairs appearing. If I click on actions, I can navigate to have a look, for example, at the GL entries, the VAT entries, and so on. And so again, the first way of invoicing customers. Then there's a second way, and that's invoicing customers from a sales invoice. Now that's something that you could do when you invoice, for example, a service, when you don't need to ship what you're selling separately from invoicing. Then you can also directly create a sales invoice. However, a sales invoice can also be interesting for invoicing multiple shipments, and that's also something I will demonstrate. So I will start again with creating new sales orders. In this case, I will create 2 new sales orders for the same customer. So let's take customer 10,000 again. And I will sell some items. So in this case, for example, some side panels, 100 pieces, and maybe also a second item. Let's take the Athens desk, 4 pieces. There we go. And I will post the order. However, very important, I will only ship, so I will not invoice. And suppose this is what this customer has ordered. We do have the items on stock, which means that we can ship them immediately. And that's basically what we will do here. So here I will select ship in order to only post the shipment. So here, if I now scroll to the right, you can see that the quantity shipped is 104 for the second item, but everything is still to invoice. Now the same customer places another order. So I will go to sales orders again. So I will create a new sales order, and this is now a second order for the same customer, customer 10,000. Again, I will enter some items, and in this case, for example, some mountings, 150 pieces. And also here we see that we do have the items on stock, so there's no availability warning, which means that we can ship them just as the previous order. So, and also in this case, I will only select ship. And there we go. So, and also here, if I scroll to the right, you can see now that the 150 pieces are shipped, but not invoiced yet. So, and this means that the situation is that we have 2 shipped but non-invoiced orders for this customer. And maybe we have agreed to invoice the customer at the end of the month, which means that I would like to create an invoice for multiple shipments. So and that's also something that we can do. So let me demonstrate this. I will go to sales invoice. So I will create a new sales invoice. This is of course an invoice for customer 10,000. So there we go. And now, and this is very important, I will need to use a function to retrieve the shipped non-invoiced lines. What you never should do in this case is create the lines manually, because if I create manually a line, an item line, for example, for the item I want to invoice. Then when posting the sales invoice, the system will post the items a second time from inventory. And that's of course not the intention. So instead of entering lines manually, it's better to go to a specific function. So here at the top, if I click on line, you can see the function get shipment lines. So when using this function, I can retrieve all shipped non-invoiced items for this customer. So here you can see the examples I just made. So the side panel and the attendance desk, and then the mounting. And it seems that there's another item that we didn't already invoice to the customer. But here it's up to you what you would like to select. So for example, if I click here, I can click on select more. And suppose I only would like to invoice the last 3 lines. That's no problem at all. So I can select each line, or you can make a selection of multiple lines or one line if you want. Okay, suppose I would like to invoice these 3 lines. Next, I will click on OK. And you will see that the lines are inserted here in my new sales invoice with a reference to the shipment number, for example. So this is the second way of invoicing. And by the way, I can change anything I want. So suppose that you don't want to invoice the full quantity. That's no problem at all. I can enter 90 or 50, whatever. So that's something that is possible. And I can also update prices. The system has retrieved these prices from the sales order, but suppose that at the moment of invoicing we would like to change the prices. That's still possible, just as entering a line discount and so on. Okay, so let's go to the Home tab on the ribbon, then click on Post. Do you want to post the invoice? Yes. And there we go. Now we have, let's have a look at the invoice. So now we have invoiced multiple shipments with one invoice, as you can see here. Also interesting to know is that when you use this way of invoicing shipments, you will see that the sales orders are saved in the system. So if I go to my sales orders by clicking here on the sales order queue, you can see here the sales orders I have just used in my example. So let me open, for example, 1005. So let's go and have a look. So I will click on View. So there you can see the sales order, the mountings. So the mountings that we just invoiced. And here, if you now scroll to the right, you can see that the quantity of 150 is entered in the quantity shipped, but also in the quantity invoiced field, you see. So invoicing sales orders with a sales invoice, so by using the get shipment lines function, will result in the fact that your sales orders will stay in the system. Now suppose that I would like to apply the concept of invoicing multiple shipments for multiple customers. Then instead of entering everything manually like I did in my previous example, we can also use the combine shipments function. So let's go and have a look, and I will use the search function and I will search for the combine shipments function. There we go. So I'm basically, like I just said, this is a report that will create sales invoices of all posted shipments, so all items that have been shipped but are not invoiced yet. And so exactly the same as I did manually in my previous example, but then by using a function. So I can enter the posting date and the document date. And so for example, suppose that this is something that we do typically at the end of the month. Then I can enter January 31st, 2020, for example. I can select if I would like to calculate invoice discounts, if I would like to post invoices. So if I don't select the field, the system creates non-posted invoices. If I select the fields, it will try to post the invoices immediately. Then standard payment terms, copy text lines, and so on. And then if you want, you can also filter here on customer. If you don't want to run the function for all customers, for example, you can enter any filter. So I will leave this open so that the system checks each customer, and by clicking on OK, the report runs and we will get a result in a few moments. Here it is. So the shipments are now combined and the number of invoices created is 5. So apparently there were shipped items that were not yet invoiced for 5 customers, And that's what we will find now in the sales invoices. So now if I go to sales invoices, so the non-posted sales invoices, of course, you can see here the 5 invoices. So the first 5 lines are the invoices the system just created. And so for example, if I open, let's take the second one, you will see basically the same result as in my previous example, you see. So this customer also had a number of shipped but non-invoiced items. And similar to my previous example, the system now created a sales invoice for all these shipments, you see? So exactly the same, but by running a function. So if you made agreements with multiple customers to invoice, for example, everything at the end of the month, the combined shipments function is a very efficient and a very good function to use.